right, there you go. Um, I'm really excited because this is the first time we're doing actually an exhibition that we currently have. So you have the opportunity to go see this exhibition after this talk, if you happen to come from Arizona. But otherwise, we'll give you a glimpse of what it's like. So first and foremost, huge shout out to Monique Long, the curator of Elegies, who did an amazing job on this exhibition, of course, and took time out of her precious time to meet with us. Also, a big thank you to MOAD's Director of Curatorial Affairs, Elena Gross. I want to say thank you so much for the two of you. And Elegies. So we have art from 16 artists on our third floor in our third floor gallery right now. And we will have it for a couple more months. So come and visit MOAD. 16 artists with various expressions and mediums, including paintings, photographs, sculpture, printmaking, performance, and installation. There's so much that you can see at MOAD. All of them working with the question: how does an artist create work about the body without the body being present? And in this show, many of the artists are primarily known for their portraiture, for doing portraiture art. So this is a different way of experiencing their art. So here we go. We've only brought about 10 pieces because that's all we can cover, but there are many pieces in the gallery that we can't wait for you to check out. All right, Dimitri, I think am I leaving out some information, Lucreza, Dimitri, Rodney,
I
maybe
think,
about
I
the
mean, I think,
exhibition? Yeah.
I think we can address it kind of as we go along.
Okay,
I think it'll naturally come up through as we talk about the artworks.
sounds good to me. Okay. All right. This is just to give you kind of a scale of some of the work. And the first work that we're going to be discussing is that of Elizabeth Colomba. And this is the third floor gallery. And the first piece is here. So we'll have about 16 seconds of looking at art. Then we pair it with music. We listen to the music and enjoy the art. Then we'll talk about the artwork and a little bit about the music. I hope that sounds good to everyone. All right, let me set my timer because I can look at this all day long. So I need to limit myself as well. Yeah. Okay. All right. That abruptly ended. Yeah, what are people thinking? What are folks thinking? And Dimitri will take us into and will lead us in this conversation.
Yeah, I would love for folks to drop into the chat kind of, what were you noticing as you were listening to the music and watching the image? I can certainly tell you what was true for me, but I would love to hear from participants, what you thought of the pairing. I'm just really interested. And Rodney is monitoring, so thank you, Rodney. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll just kind of start off with me, and maybe you'll agree or not. I'm waiting for the chat to start pop it off. But I always just go when I'm listening to that, go to the bubble. And I don't know if that's true for anyone else. And I imagine the bubble kind of floating along. Yes, P Fox says the same thing, right? For some reason, your eye, at least for me, just kind of goes there. And I think it's the object that's in the still life that would be in motion. Um, yeah, I wonder if anyone else has anything else. But I guess while I'm waiting for your comments to come in, I'll just start talking about the piece. I am totally obsessed and fascinated with this artwork in the gallery, which is interesting because I'm not necessarily someone who loves still life paintings, but I think because of Elizabeth Colomba and the work that she does, I'm starting to really get into them and the whole idea of them. So just to, in the way that I like to do it, just to give a real quick background, still life paintings originated in the Dutch Golden Age in the 17th century. And this was, the paintings took on a couple of forms, but most likely, or most obviously, or most commonly, I should say, they were considered vanitas paintings. So paintings that showed really the temporality of life. Just, there's fruit, there's flowers, there's things that are in various stages of rotting or decomposition. And oftentimes, there would be exotic things brought from, overseas, such as the coconuts in this image. And then they would do multiple images of them, and over time you would see them starting to rot and fall apart. And that was to remind us, like a memento mori, that one day we will die. The other way that these paintings were looked at was just through the artist's technique, the ability for them to capture something that looks lifelike. And so Elizabeth Colomba does both. And, I also learned from Monique Long that Elizabeth Colomba likes to use is it the golden rule? Somebody chime in to remind me.
Golden ratio?
The golden ratio. Thank you, Sade.
No problem.
So if you were to look that up, it's really like a spiral that moves out. And if you look at this painting from a distance, you can't help but see that spiral starting with the coconuts and kind of moving out with the branches. But what Elizabeth is looking at, so her family migrated from Martinique. And she was raised in the United States, but has a connection to Martinique and going back and forth. She's starting off with these coconuts, which are synonymous. We've talked about this on other artists we see it episodes, but coconuts are synonymous in our imaginations with the Caribbean, with some islands and tropical locations. But what oftentimes people don't know is the coconuts are a product of colonialism. So the Spanish and other European colonizers brought them coconuts to the quote unquote New World in their explorations and planted them there. Coconuts, the meat of the coconut provides good fat, a little bit of protein. There's the water, and they last for a really long time. You can also use them as a flotation device if the ship sinks, right? So they become synonymous, but they're really a product of colonialism. She's laying that on top of Madras cloth, which is now synonymous with Caribbean women who have wrapped their hair in Madras cloth, and especially in the French Antilles, it's their official costume, their official clothing. And that also comes from India, from Madras in southern India. Originally was brought by the Dutch, and on Sundays and on holidays when enslaved women could dress however they wanted to, they would often gravitate towards the bright Madras cloth. And then it became part of their entire outfits. And so now you've got these two things that are synonymous with the Caribbean that were brought there through colonialism. So she's pointing us to so many deep things through this beautiful, seemingly simple painting right here. There's the bugs, which are often signs that have different meaning. I don't know what the bugs mean. There's like the rhino beetle, there's the butterfly, and then there's the bubble, which eventually will pop. So yeah, I don't know. It just there's just so much more in this painting than what originally meets the eye, and so I'm just fascinated by, you know, her thinking, her work. And Elizabeth Colomba usually paints figuratively, gorgeous, gorgeous figurative pieces. And so she is practicing her hand with this series of still life paintings. Does anyone want to add anything?
We have some comments I'll read. Joan says, my eye goes to the cut piece of fruit and then up to the branch from which it looks it was ripped. And then P. Fox says she is struck also by the non-standard fruit, you know, that it's coconut and not something we would typically see in a still life. And we of course we had comments on the fly from our very own today.
I know, it's my first time seeing it.
It's so funny. And then Deborah is pointing out sugarcane, that may be sugarcane in the background.
And you know, Dimitri, one thing that I remember Monique mentioning is also this whole painting in the background. You know, I just I would love to see her process. I would like to be in her studio and see how she works her way out to the color and the gold leaf. That would be amazing.
Well, yeah, she's using the same techniques that the Dutch masters like Rembrandt were using, right? So she does this underpainting with just what they would do, like a burnt sienna or some dark color, and then you would capture all the lights and the shadows, and then you start to layer and layer and layer and layer the paint on top. So, you know, it's an intensive process that most painters don't employ anymore.
Yeah, and it's just so intense to see it in person. You know, our big call to action from this program is, if you can, go to MOAD and see this, because that many layered technique really is just incredible richness.
Yeah, agreed. In that same gallery on the other side of the wall, we find this precious, precious piece that we're zooming into. So we had the teeth that are on top of that originally, so we had too many pieces. So we're not covering that part, but we're covering the art that is on the wall. All right. Lucreza, take it away. I wish we could play that song, all of it.
Right?
I just love it.
So this piece is Door Knocker Still Life Cluster with 11 Golds by LaKayla Brown. And it is made of plaster, foam, acrylic, and wood. And I absolutely adore this piece because it has the symbolism of the door knocker earrings, which I'm wearing today.
Nice.
It's just iconic. The earrings were iconic in the 1990s, the hip hop culture, and I chose this music, pairing because it just so symbolized what this whole piece was about, which was, women's power. The song is I'm Every Woman, and it was composed by Valerie Simpson and Nicholas Ashford, the infamous singer songwriting duo. And, they wrote several Motown hits, things like Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand. Anyway, so it just kind of, this it brought it all together for me. She Lakayla uses hoop earrings prominently throughout a lot of her work. It's about the empowerment of women and the coming of age. And when I see this and I heard the music, I just could picture, a summer day hanging out in Oakland, all of the young girls walking around with their bell-bottom jeans and midriff tops with the haired wraps and the big clunky earrings, and just, having that whole vibe, you just walking through and just having a whole vibe about yourself. And so I just love this. I love how it also kind of brings forward the themes of Egyptian work. When you look at it, it kind of makes you think about, the pieces that have hieroglyphics, so it brings all of that kind of together. And it just is, for me, just a magnificent piece. Love it.
Thank you, Lucrezia. Yeah, I've wanted a clip-on of hoops that all my life. That's all I gotta say today.
What I like about this piece in a lot of the pieces in the show is, it's going to have different meanings for different people. And for me, as someone who's external to the Black community, I feel like I'm being invited in to kind of appreciate the culture and learn more about it. And I think a lot of these artworks are doing that in a very nice way.
I want to say, like, you think of the 70s and bell bottoms. This immediately transports me to like late 80s, early 90s, thinking about Salt and Pepper and, like the New York hip hop movement during the time. So I can even think of the haircut that Peppa had. And then P Fox is asking about the construction. And so today, do you want to take that? Because you had a chance to talk to Lakayla directly.
I did. I'm gonna try. So this is she uses a cast the cast process. So she has a cast, and then it's porcelain poured into this rectangular cast, I believe, and then these pieces are pressed into that in the bas relief. Yes, that's how she created it. It's very, very heavy. It's very heavy, and I'm trying to remember all the details because I don't actually tour in that kind of area. So I'm trying to remember all the details she shared with us.
So some of them she's pressing into the surface, and then some of them, like, she casts them into the plaster and then like immediately mounts that onto the plaster. So there's no actual jewelry inside. It's all various techniques of casting. It's mind-boggling, and this piece looks heavy but is really delicate.
It's very delicate. Yeah, it's very delicate, and the whole process of hanging it at the museum itself it was an interesting story of how heavy it is and how it needed to be very delicately transported and mounted. And so, yeah.
I'm also just really taking. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm just taking. For me, it's just really interesting that this is considered a still life. Because it doesn't have flowers, but it's decoration. It's adornment, put onto display. And so, it's elevating something that, I was reading about door knocker earrings and like how they were common, especially in like Asian beauty shops. You could get them for $5, right? Yes. And so they became this elevated status symbol, but only for communities of color.
Yes.
It's almost like a sculpture, really. A lot of these works kind of are redefining still life.
Yeah. If you haven't, I really encourage everyone to go, to find it online and see her work that was featured at the Rockefeller Center in New York. Just incredible. And she uses the same kind of method to show, and the whole lobby was covered in her work. Such beautiful, beautiful work. Okay, on to the next piece. Oh, sorry about that.
Africa is the birthplace of mankind. Africans were the first builders of civilization. They discovered mathematics, invented writing, developed sciences, engineering, medicine, religion, fine arts, and built the Great Pyramids, an architectural achievement which still baffles modern science.
Rodney and Lucarisa.
Well, first I want to say this is an artist who's both born in Africa but raised in the United States. So from Ethiopia, so your neck of the woods today.
That's right.
And just a lot of very interesting symbolism in this. Again, I think it's going to mean different things to different people. But it was really interesting to read about the artist. I hope I'm saying her name right. I actually didn't check on the pronunciation. Awal Arizku. Does anybody know if that's right or not? Apologies.
I would say it. I wouldn't, but I've heard Monique say AWOL, so I'm not entirely sure. It's not Amharic, so I'm not entirely sure. His name could be, yeah.
You know, it's a still life, but it has a lot of human figures in it. Has the mask, has the sculpture, and then it has this bottle of syrup, Aunt Jemima syrup, which has very powerful symbolism, kind of negative for me. And then we have the color card, which is used for post-production color matching, and there's some symbolism in that too. I was interested to read about the other works that this artist has done. One of which is there's a Queen Nefertiti. So one of these figures is Queen Nefertiti, and there's a Queen Nefertiti disco ball that was in a gallery in New York City, and it's called Nefertiti Miles Davis Gold. So just really interesting use of these different kind of figures. Lucretia, what did you make of this?
Well, I just, number one, I absolutely love it. I love the fact that he has all of these different portraits, basically, of African women, African American women. I was reading up on what he was saying about it because I was really curious about his term Afro-esotericism. God, I can't believe I was able to say that word without hacking it up. Anyway, I'm very honest. And he says, what he says about it, he says he created this term and this work to say, no, we can take it all the way back to the origins of Africa and pre-colonial history and find ways to work from the origin, which is one of the reasons why I paired this with the song that we played, because it talks about, Africa being the birthplace of mankind. And so he said that he's interested in the Black imagination and the wealth of history that being Black can afford us. Wow, powerful statement to me, because so many times we are taught that being black is a negative thing, and we have all of this kind of like negative history. But he says, he's interested in the wealth of history that being Black can afford us. Such a very powerful statement. I love it. And so he goes on, he says he's explaining what he calls Afro-esotericism, that he's interested in nothing less than creating a vernacular of and for the African diaspora. And so this whole take on Africa being the origin of things, this whole take on it being a positive thing, it's marvelous. And then you have, the symbols, like the one statue is a fertility statement. And then you have, which I thought was really interesting, you have the one where the woman is holding a calabash of sorts, which, is kind of indicative of women working. And then you have, as Rodney was saying, you have Queen Nefertiti in all her queenliness. And so it's just a really powerful and positive piece. And then additionally, because this is supposed to be a still life, it's very interesting that he has incense flowing from this piece, which itself indicates movement. So it's kind of like a different look at it being a still life with this moving part of this still life. So it's a very interesting piece. I know that someone mentioned the bricks. There wasn't much said about the bricks, but what I found personally interesting is that being from Louisiana, Louisianans would take brick dust and kind of put it over their entryways or their stairways, their external stairways, as a point of protection. And so I kind of look at this as, it is a protection of history. It's a protection of the knowledge and the understanding that things did begin in Africa. So just a fascinating piece for me.
Couple comments in chat. JK says Nefertiti reminds me of the question of why Egyptian art isn't considered African art in Western art history in museums. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because there are so many people who don't consider Egypt as being in Africa, but when you clearly look at the map, it clearly is. So, that is definitely fruit for conversation. I'm not sure that we could enter into that right now, but it is definitely food for thought. Yes.
I want to just I just want to chime in because I got obsessed with the color correction card, and because artist Stephanie Sejuko, if people know her, she's at UC Berkeley, and she's in the art department. She did a project with it, and it left me on a rabbit hole. I think I shared it with you today.
Yeah, you did. About
the kind of the racist history of the color correction cards, and something I never thought of, like the film, like when people were shooting film on pictures on actual film, it was designed for white skin, which is why in the 60s and 70s, Black people never looked good in photography. And you had to be a master of shooting Black skin to get it correct because you had to color correct for it. And, it's not until like the late 70s, because of chocolate companies and furniture companies complaining to Kodak, that they fixed brown tones in their film. So, I think I think he's also referencing these Black symbols, and, you've got the negative symbol of the Aunt Jemima. You've got some of the more positive things. You've got the commercialized version of Nefertiti, which is why I think there's this wad of money. The spiritual side of Black womanhood with the incense going on, or the commodification of the spirituality, if you want to go there. And kind of like Dorothy said, I think the bricks also represent a foundation. They're building blocks.
Yeah,
okay, I have to say this piece is growing on me because I didn't understand it at first, so I needed your help, and so I'm so glad that you're helping me understand this.
I love his work.
It's a great conversation starter. You could spend a lot of time just standing in front of this and talking with a friend or a family member about what you're seeing and how you react to it. More comments. Joan says also yellow tones were a problem until Japanese companies made films such as Fuji. And Felicia says, I find it interesting how many people do not know the origin of the icon called Jemima. It was a mispronunciation of Yemoja, the Yoruba deity, which the Europeans misunderstood the significance of. Wow, didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
I didn't either. Wow.
Whew.
Huh.
Thank you for that.
Sade, I wanted to also throw in, I just quickly alluded to the music, but that was Stephen Marley from the dynasty of Marley musicians. And he was a 8-time Grammy Award winner for various albums. And this particular album was called, and I keep saying album, but it's also a CD, called Revelation Part 1, The Root of Life. And the actual cover of the album / CD had Amharic writing on it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful cover. So
Yeah, it is a beautiful color. I wish I had kept the cover that, yeah, it was beautiful. All right. Still, we're still on the left side of the gallery. I don't think we've moved to the right side yet. Yeah. Look at this piece next. 16 seconds. All right. Okay. So Dimitri introduced me to this music, and it just seemed so fitting for this piece because of how regal the surrounding of this piece looks, the kind of this kind of amazing, very organized look to it. And then it kind of breaks the rhythm and goes into a different genre. And just as we're looking at it and as we're looking closer to it, it's this neat, neat still life. And then as we go closer to it, we see so many things that don't necessarily belong together, but they do belong together. And we'll take a look at it. Rashad Newsom, Newsom is a filmmaker. I mean, what does he not do? Collages, assemblage, sculpture, film, video, animation, photography, music. I mean, you name it, he does it, but also centers in highlighting the Vogue culture, the ballroom Vogue culture, which was later popularized by Madonna and pop musicians and things like that, but started with Black and Latinos in New York. This ballroom Vogue, Vogue music, Vogue culture, and he pays homage to that. And in a way, elegies, when we go back to elegies, to what the word means, and lamentation and mourning for something or someone has been, that, and mainly someone that has been lost. In some ways, we're also clinging onto a culture, to its origin. And we all know that the minute that Black culture hits media, it just kind of becomes everybody's culture. It becomes pop culture. And so what does it mean to hold on to, much like the earrings, what we saw earlier with LaKayla's earrings. What does it mean to be sad but still celebrate a culture that has been appropriated by other cultures and has gotten into mainstream media? And so I kind of like that, and also Rashad Newsom kind of reminds us of this culture of, talking about teeth, and in the gallery, you can see 2 or 3 pieces that are in conversation that are talking about teeth and gold teeth and those kind of things. And in this, we also see mouths and teeth as being flowers in this piece. And so, yeah, any thoughts or?
Well, I'll share a couple of my
Yes.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Researching this. again, I think we're looking at a piece that just totally reimagines what a still life can be. This is wholly unlike any still life you would experience in from Eurocentric culture. And I came across something written in the Chronicle by it was in the datebook section. I want to get the right. It's Tony Bravo wrote this. He said, speaking of Rashad Newsom, he says, the norm in art is for queer people and people of color to have to work to find themselves in art and stories created by the dominant white heterosexual culture. But what if the situation were reversed? And I think that's a great comment about a lot of these pieces, and this one in particular, that it's just really asking us to think about, like, what would happen. These communities were excluded from the culture that produced the still lifes that are traditional. So we have a complete reimagining of them. Also, it's worth pointing out that this is an artist who has ties to both New York City and Oakland. I think he's worked in both Brooklyn and Oakland over the years. Originally from New Orleans, born in New Orleans in 1979. So Lucretia, another one of your Louisiana folks.
Born in the best year ever.
And yeah, so and it's also the materials, really interesting. Automotive paint and leather. Like, this frame is a work of art unto itself.
And it's huge. You can't tell from looking out on this. This piece is huge.
Yeah, it's hard to tell
There you
from.
go.
Yeah.
It's almost as big as the door.
That frame is amazing to me. I just
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Any thoughts? Any ideas from folks? All right. Oof, we're moving on to one of my favorite pieces. Here. I chose this music. I chose this music also because that clip at the end of it also reminds me of a graduation commencement song, and youth and growth and innocence, all those kind of things. And this music was actually written. It's called In Memoriam, Stephen Lawrence, and Philip Herbert composed this in memory of a Black British teenager murdered in 1993 by a gang of white men. And Philip Herbert, Black British composer, paid tribute to him with an elegy composed for 18 string players, each representing 1 year of Lawrence's life. And the composer describes as a gesture of empathy. And at the same time, he also talks about hope will help us press together across our communities to help realize Stephen's dreams. And in the same kind of very similar way, also this piece is called Tamir. Tamir, I think, wait, what number is that? Fourth? No, wait, 5, 6, 7. Is it 7? My Roman
7.
numerals. 7, yes. Tamir 7. And it's these two pieces that are on swing, and it is for Tamir Rice and Devan Shimonyama. Installation is for Tamir Rice. And if you remember, in November of 2014, a young boy a young kid was taken away from us, a 12-year-old Tamir Elijah Rice, as he was playing at a recreational center with a toy gun, with a red tippy toy gun, a 12-year-old playing on a swing. And he was shot fatally by the police, and no justice has been served from that, and we haven't gotten any justice. And Devan makes this as an elegy, these swings, to kind of help us get closer and familiar with the subject matter, and help us digest this really difficult information, and at the same time not forget about a young kid that had been taken away from us. And he notes at the innocence, much like how those 18 strings in the instrument of the music we just heard play, much like that, he also, adds in the silk flowers that we always see, not always, but often see on the side of the road after an accident or something has happened. We see these silk flowers decorating the top and the bottom of these swings, and also, noting the innocence, the earliness of this death. And for us not to forget, swings come up and go back. And so as they swing, for the memory to come back as well. And Devan says also, David, is it Devin? I can't pronounce names. He also talks about in his artist talk that he wants eyes to be to elevate and to look up. So the chains, if you're at the gallery and follow the chains up, you'll be able to kind of see up to the ceiling, looking up. And so that's an important thing that he added. And also elevating in another way, elevating an everyday item that we see on a playground to be this holder of memory of a young man that was taken from us too early. And if we look closer, you'll be able to see these rhinestones that are very decorative. I don't know if you were able to see closer on this, but he has rhinestones. He adds rhinestones, and the things that are decorating everything. He says that at some point, these imitational jewels become their own beauty, their own things. He talks about that. So yeah, that's it. This is one of my favorite pieces at the gallery. You cannot miss it. It's right in the middle of the gallery, and the shadows that it casts, they are kind of like 4 shadows that it casts on the hardwood floor. It's just powerful to be in its presence.
Couple of comments in chat. Mildred says, I loved this piece and was fascinated when I went to the exhibit. So much beauty, so many layers to unpack.
I agree.
P. Fox says it's stilled life. Really good comment. And says swings also indicate extremes and perhaps recall general political waxings and wanings.
That's a really good point. Yeah, really good point.
And it's, to me, interesting that a still life could be a political statement. Like, what a way to make that statement.
Yeah. Again, going back to, the idea of how can we talk about a body without the body being present, is also something that we're noticing here. Great.
Whisper, listen, whisper, listen, whisper, say we're free. Rumors flying, must be lying, can it really be? Can't conceive it, can't believe it, but that's what they say. Slave no longer, this is Freedom Day. Freedom Day, it's Freedom Day. Throw those
Look, Lisa, take it away. Oh, I mean, actually, it was Charlie. So we all have today. This was Charlie's piece. Charlie, if you're out there, yeah.
So this piece is Feast with Nkisi, and it is a painting about conflict and conquest and memorial that is presented as a feast on a silver platter. And it speaks of symbols of colonial power, which are balanced by the stolen objects of cultural significance. The Nkisi Nkondi figure is a source of spiritual and physical healing, and it is very interesting that it is represented lying down, which kind of symbolizes its diminished state as an object of conquest. And the navigational device dates back to the 17th century, and it's called a sextant. I just learned that word, you guys, sextant.
I learned it on Jeopardy.
And so it's a navigational device, and as I say, it comes from the late 17th century, and it was primarily used for celestial navigation. It would measure the angle between an astronomical object and the horizon to measure the latitude and the altitude or the position on an aeronautical or nautical chart. Then you have the Dutch flowers and the Old English malt liquor, which is a reference to colonial power, but it also is a reference more recently in the Black community. I guess you could say actually it is a colonial power. It is something that is drank by a multitude of people to forget their problems, basically. And you see these bottles around African American neighborhoods filled with less drinkable solutions. And we'll just leave it at that. Old English malt liquor was also the preferred drink of the early 90s gangster rappers. And so you would also hear that referenced in a lot of their music. The hanging shoes are a nod to the practice of tossing shoes over a power line in memorial. And, you know, it took me a long time to figure out this whole thing about the shoes being over the power line. Like, why is this a signal that people are rich enough to throw their shoes? I couldn't get it. And finally, someone shared that information with me, and I just thought, wow, you know, we in African American communities and people of color communities will find a way to memorialize a person, our loved ones, our community leaders. The cheese and the carrots and the ducks refer to monetary gain, and the garlic and the peeled orange and the prosciutto round out the feast. And so it's, you know, just all of this, you know, all of these things. And you have the, you know, the gun that just, you know, signifies the violence that occurs in our communities. And it's very interesting to see that the Nkisi figure is actually lying on the gun as well, which is a very, very strong statement. So this piece is very, it's multi-layered. It has a lot of symbolism. It just says a lot. I paired this with this particular song because the song speaks of freedom, which is almost direct opposite of what this is portraying. And I just thought this is very, very, very interesting to pair the thought of freedom with all of the symbolism that goes on in this particular piece. The composer of this music is Max Roach, who is a phenomenal drummer who was actually known as one of the premier drummers in history. And that's a big statement. And it was sang by his wife, Abby Lincoln, who was famous for her avant-garde music, and she would perform and write her own compositions as well. And both of them were very, very much powerful forces in civil rights movement. And they actually helped to generate the passion for the civil rights movement in people through their music. So I just thought it was a perfect pairing for this.
We have some interesting thoughts in chat. First of all, one person points out that their son has been trained to use a sextant, so I guess it's still in use. Dorothy notes that the figure on the gun is festering. P. Fox, the flute.
What does that mean? Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering what that. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Tell us more about that, Dorothy. Is it
festering?
that it's disintegrating or decaying or something like that? That's kind of
Rotting.
Yeah, that's what I thought she meant by that. P. Fox, the flutes, the blue and white china. So what's the story with the china that's being used? I think is a question.
That's also really common in Dutch still lives. I mean, if you look into blueware china, it comes from China, but then the Dutch replicated it because. So anyway, we're talking about colonialism and something that would have been popular in Dutch still life paintings, but also reeks of, as JK is saying, it came from China, known as white gold. But then if you go to the US Virgin Islands, you'll find it all over because the Dutch manufactured their own, like they did Dutch wax cloth as well. Anything that someone wanted and coveted, they would make their own version of it for their people initially and then others. So it just speaks to colonialism and conquest.
Yes.
The other thing that people are kind of talking about is the bird, the dead bird. Is it a pigeon, which Carol thinks might be a street bird?
They're actually ducks. They're two wild ducks. And again, this is was kind of a common thing in still lifes, is the hanging of wildlife.
Yeah.
And then Joan asks about the figure on the gun. Could that be Nkisi?
That is the Nkisi. Yes.
Nkisi, yeah.
And the Nkisi is typically wood with various nails pounded into its body.
So this is another great conversation starter, this piece. And again, something that people from different backgrounds will see in different ways, and you can learn a lot from just kind of unpacking it.
And I just think it's really interesting that all of this, with the exception of the stuff that's hanging, is presented on a silver platter. Speaks volumes.
Yeah. When I looked at the Nkisi and the gun, because of my eyes training, I just saw a cross. I saw a figure laying on the cross, the gun being kind of part of the cross immediately. But then I started looking closer, and I started seeing the gun and the Nkisi as separate pieces, and then the Nkisi laying on the gun. That was, And also, I just saw, I don't know the meaning of these flowers. Dimitri probably would know, but I saw some forget-me-nots in there. So,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right.
Oh, and then Carol says, this piece is so deep in so many ways. My eyes welled up when I saw it in person. So So, I think this is going to be one of the real highlights.
Yeah.
At least it was for me, of the show.
Yeah. It is also a fairly large piece. So, okay. All right. Started. The second piece that or second to last, I guess. Wow, time flies. Piece is this one right here.
This bitter earth, well, what fruit it bears, what good is love? That no one shares.
Dimitri, take it away.
I guess Lucreza has a lot to say about this. I'll just talk about the pairing of the music first, because you revealed a lot of stuff to me about this. But this bitter earth, we're looking at a landscape and the beautiful, amazing voice of Dinah Washington and her rendition of this. The song was composed by Clyde Otis, an African-American composer. And so it's just fitting. The song became popular in the last few years when a remix came out, but there's nothing like the original. I just want to say, and Lucreza, I will invite you to talk more about this piece. I'll chime in also.
Okay. Well, for me, it was just a very a personal piece because it evoked in me memories of a funeral parlor. I can remember, as a teen, having to go, with my parents to make, funeral arrangements for various relatives, and immediately, you would walk into, at least this is for an African American funeral place. You would walk in, and this was the kind of painting that you would see on office walls. And I can just remember sitting and just looking at these things while the business was being taken care of with gospel music playing in the background. And so it just gave me that nostalgic feeling. And when I read about this a little bit more, this is actually what the artist Dina Lawson likes to do. She grew up, sitting for family portraits, and those were the first images that she would see. And so, what she does in her work is to try and reach backwards to pull those memories forward. And so, it's statements have been made. That's why her work glows with nostalgia. It's the kind of appreciation of something that expands only after you leave it behind. And that's kind of like the feeling that I get, those things weren't really important to me as a teen, but as an adult, it really evokes a lot of family kind of memories, and not just the sad kind of, someone's passed away, but also the gathering of family in these spaces. It brings back that. And so it's also been said about her work that she wants to ensure that those memories and those textures and those stories make it into the future with us. And I feel like, us talking about this, bringing this to the attention of people, that we are actually playing a part of, participating in bringing these memories into our future. And so it's just a very nostalgic piece for me, even down to the part where the scenes kind of come together and you see like the little holes. I mean, I can remember as a teen seeing this, obviously I've been sitting there for a while because I'm waiting for them to take care of business, but I can remember just seeing all of this. And so it just really is a very nostalgic piece. And For me, like I said, I would remember gospel music, but when you paired it with This Bitter Earth, I was like, oh my God, this is like perfect music for this piece. Just beautiful pairing.
Yeah, I want to say about Dina Lawson also, she's a photographer who is most known for her figurative photographs of Black people around the world. She travels literally around the African diaspora photographing folks. And she's masterful at the way that she crops her images to make you think you're seeing one thing. And so when I first saw this, in the gallery, I was just like, wow, that's a beautiful landscape that I'm looking at. Like, I totally fell for it, right? And then you stop and you look, as Lucurisa said, you start to see the seams, these lines, and you're like, well, what is that? And then you start to notice the little Black things, the little like nails holding it to the wall. And then you realize that you're not actually looking at a photograph of this beautiful waterscape or whatever. And then right here, as you can see, we're now then looking at this faux plant that's hanging in the side that's actually in the space that initially looks like it's real foliage. And then, then you start to open up to like, oh my gosh, this is one of those places. This is in, a funeral parlor. This is how those things are done. And I wonder if that's like specific to African-American, funeral culture from the South, because, my family's from the South and they're from Louisiana, and our family uses the local, funeral parlor that is also from Louisiana, and you don't go somewhere else,
exactly,
except for that one. And so there's all these cultural continuities from the South that are now transplanted here in California. So just interesting stuff all around.
Yeah.
You look at this photograph and you immediately, well, it takes a little while to read it and realize, oh yeah, this is like a photograph of a photograph.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have about 5 minutes. Jeez. Okay. Let's look at this piece with Dimitri. Just a second. Let's give us. And just to let everyone know that we will email you if you've attended our webinar today. We'll email you a list of songs and information about the pieces, and hope to see you at the galleries at our museum.
Grandma's hands clapped in church on Sunday morning. Grandma's hand played a tambourine so well. Grandma's hand used to issue out a warning. She'd say, Billy, don't you run so fast. Might fall on a piece of glass. Might be snakes there in that grass. Grandma's hand.
Usually, I think that was such a good pairing. I just listening to the song, looking at this piece was, yeah.
It's the
awesome.
it's the grandma tribute song for sure.
Yeah.
And it does go really fittingly. This is a piece by Njideka Akunyili Crosby, who's an LA-based artist, born and initially raised in Enugu, Nigeria, but moved to the United States when she was 14 years old. And this piece is from a series of artworks about her grandma's parlor. Or her grandma's home. So she would go back to Nigeria every single year, even though she moved to the United States. Njideka would, and her grandmother lived in a village. And so she just had all of these memories of visiting, of being kind of like this, having this hybrid identity and understanding of herself, being Nigerian, being American, going back to Nigeria, going to visit, her birthplace, Enugu, which is a city, and then going to the village to visit her grandma, and then noticing all the kind of cultural clashing, or not clashing, hybridity that would happen, the mix-ups. Nothing in Nigeria was just Nigerian. There was elements of the West, put into the mix. And if you'll zoom back out today,
Sure.
She took a picture of her grandmother's table. And so what you're seeing on the bottom is actually the photograph transferred of a close-up of her grandmother's table and the things that she had on there. So having the Virgin Mary, who's the frame in the back, on the table, which talks about colonialism, talks about cultural hybridity there, an image, I'm assuming, of her grandmother in the near frame closest to us. And then all of these items, these bowls that are just ubiquitous across Africa, these plastic bowls from China that are used for washing dishes, washing clothes, like just even taking a bath in, right? For a bucket bath.
So true.
And, she's got a couple of those, these kerosene lamps that are in here. And she talks about how those were just important. They're a symbol that shows up in Njideka's work because, where her grandmother lives in the rural parts of Nigeria, the power goes out at any moment. And so you need to have that lamp to kind of light your way. This is, I think, the only work in the whole exhibition that actually has images of people. We actually do have the bodies. So in the background, if you can zoom back in now today, besides the photos in the frame, which are typical for a still life to have a photo because it's a representation, it's not the person. But in the background, we almost have these kind of ghosted images. She doesn't talk about who they are. I would imagine it could be her grandmother and her grandfather in their younger days. She often does take fashion magazines from Nigeria, though. So that could be. She doesn't quite talk about what it's about. But yeah, I think for her, it's just really this memory of her grandmother's home after her grandmother has passed away. How these different objects are, even the thermos that we're seeing here, like these are carriers of legacy and containers of memory. And just thinking about how the domestic space is hybrid. There's no pure African, there's no pure American, there's nothing. We're like in this global world, everything's all mixed up and comes from different places, but still this is very distinctly Nigerian, even while these things are coming from various places.
I really like that. Yeah, I really like that because these I had walked by it and something feels familiar, and I thought, a Black household. That's what it reminds me of. But then the specific items, like I grew up with these things, and it's just so nice to put that together, and then to talk about the hybridity. I really like that.
A couple comments, and two people basically agreed that it looks like a shrine. I think it is a shrine to her grandmother. And I just wanted to throw in there for the group that Charlie just loves Crosby's work. We always have to fight with him to be able to talk about it. And I think she has a really great work in the SF MoMA collection that is often on display.
Yeah. And all right.
Oh, and then P. Fox, struck by the juxtaposition of mass-produced items and grandmother as seat of tradition. Great comment.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Okay. We're back to the other gallery, the other side of the gallery, where we would look at this piece over here. Here's another piece that Charlie wanted to cover. Let's listen to the music. I chose this music for this. This was originally Charlie's piece. He loves Toyin Ojutola too, and I chose this piece, this song, was because of, one is when I looked at the Calabash Gourd, the lines that are very, very typical of Toyin's work, very much her style. It kind of meanders. The tunes kind of meander in a way that she has carved or drawn the lines on the Calabash Gourd. And the second thing is also thinking about the diasporic movement of the two people whose Mahois Ege Mariam Gabru is an Ethiopian musician who had been all across Europe and kind of pushed out of the country, and her family persecuted, run away, becomes a nun at the age of 21 in a rural part of Ethiopia, then leaves to go to Israel. And it's a lot of movement, and it's called The Homeless Wanderer. And The Homeless Wanderer, which was written for like a shepherd boy or shepherd kid, playing his or her flute, mainly his flute in the rural part of Ethiopia, but at the same time, at the core of it, really communicating what it's like for her to live in all of these places, and ending up being a nun in a rural part of Ethiopia. And she was born in a wealthy family, within a wealthy family, and she used to, she was a civil servant and singer for Haile Selassie at the time. And then during the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, she and her family were prisoners of war. And then, of course, it didn't help during the dictatorship. She was also her family was again persecuted. But also kind of seeing that the idea of home, aside from the four walls, the idea of home. Where is home? And I think something that Toyin also shows us with this piece, to me, is also this Calabash Gourd that is very kind of an African thing for many of us. She puts it on top of an armoire or something like that. We all have pieces like that from home that we put away somewhere that's visible, that we can just connect. That's home. That connects to home, and so it connects. It makes that connection for me. But also the shadows that Toyin does on this thing make kind of balancing the corner of the armoire that comes here and pushing the piece to the edge on this one, balancing the piece. It's such a beautiful work. Also, something that kind of stood out for me is with Toyin's work, at least, is that she talks about how she says that when you're an artist of color in particular, she says, people tend to be very biographical. Like they like to have a biography come in front of the content instead of actually seeing what you did. And she says, having characters kind of frees me from the obfuscation, and people can actually engage with the picture and the story that I am trying to tell, speaking about her figurative paintings. And so I wonder what this is doing for that, where what kind of biographic information is it giving, or can it just have a story of its own? Yeah, and this is pastel and charcoal, which is amazing. And she usually works with pen and pencil for her drawings, and of course she paints. And we've had her artwork shown at the museum in 2015. Is that right, Dimitri? 2015, around that time? I don't know. Yeah.
17.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, Joan. I haven't seen that, but that's cool. All right.
Oh my gosh, yes, she took over the entire Hirshhorn. Oh
Did she?
yeah,
I have not seen that.
everything she does is mind blowing, and the
Yeah.
fact that it's all meticulously done by hand, and to take over the entire perimeter, the inside curved wall, they're like, what? Oh my
Oh
gosh,
my God.
insane, so good.
Dimitri, could my job just be just going and looking at these things? Can my
Only if I get to join you.
All right. And this one.
That would not have anything to do with Rodney, would it?
Ooh, Felicia, I really like your comment right now. Yeah, yeah. Right.
There the snake was, there was pain. And we're trying to get back to the garden again.
Okay, so Bobby McFerrin, be happy. That one, that Bobby McFerrin, also listening to his music and understanding that he comes from such a background of classical music. I had no idea that his parents both had distinguished vocal careers. His mother was a soprano, was at the Metropolitan Opera. She was a judge, chaired at the vocal department at Fullerton College. His father sang at the Met and dubbed as actor Sidney Poitier in singing on the 1955 Porgy and Bess. So all these kind of things, it also kind of made me think about his background, because I've always wondered how he does a cappella and uses just vocals as instruments, and I think he's a brilliant composer in that way. And specifically for this piece, I thought about how he talks about the garden, and it made me think about the garden, the kind of sounds that we would hear with Birds of Paradise. They don't have flimsy leaves, right? And to think about that, so I thought about pairing these two together. But about the piece though, Dimitri, I think Rodney, this is your piece, or Dimitri or me, I don't know who is supposed to cover this one. I promise I do not know. Yeah.
I'll just say that I was really intrigued by this because there's a little reveal, I guess we should say, that if you look, these still lives are all objects without people in them. And yet, if I were to tell you there actually is a person in this painting, would I be lying to you? Would I be, like, in what way is there a person in this painting is the question I would throw out to the group. Does anybody know? And maybe we'll just keep talking about it and see if anybody wants to throw that out there. Also interesting that it's Bird of Paradise flower from South Africa, and interesting color choices here. But yeah, others in the on the panel, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think for folks, because we all kind of did a practice of looking at this piece is one of a larger series of Brittany's, and I encourage people to look at the rest of her work, because you'll start to see something in this piece that if you don't see the rest of the work, you won't see. And then when you see it, you can't unsee it ever.
And Pamela's asking, do I see Munch's The Scream under the blossoms second from the left? Yeah, that's exactly it.
Where
Oh my goodness, you're so
I
funny.
never- I
Dorothy
haven't
is
seen
seeing
that.
a Statue of Liberty.
Right. So you'll start to see things, right? You'll definitely start to see things. Um,
Felicia. That
are
is
you gonna
awesome.
give it away? Because I don't know if I was just like give that away, giving it away.
We've
Rodney,
you should do it today because you've got the pointer, and I think you should point.
I can point it as you speak. I think you should do it since you asked the folks.
So this is part of a series that has figures that are some obscured, some less obscured, an orange kind of figure. So that background behind the flower, that is a human figure in different kind of almost yoga-like poses. And it's so interesting that this is taken from the series because you really aren't going to see it if you don't see the other ones in the series where they are more obvious.
And they're kind of like slumped over, so it's like a slumped over figure. You can see the hand at the bottom right side, kind of slumped over, and they're being kind of carried by another figure on their back. And so yeah, it's like the second that I saw it, now I'm like, oh, I see as a figure, which I think it's kind of nice to not know that there's a figure initially, and you're like, what is this red thing?
Well, when we discussed it as a group, you guys were already talking about the figure, and I was like, what did I just like totally miss something, or is my brain not working today? What's it's so interesting. And it's a red figure, but is it do you read it as a Black person or a person of color? I kind of did once I started seeing the other examples.
Well, Rodney, don't feel alone because when I first saw this, I didn't see the figure, and I mean, I was struggling and struggling, and I think finally someone mentioned her other work, and I pulled it up, and I went, it's so obvious now.
Yeah, right.
That's when I got it too. I'm not even. I love this. I have the poster of it at my house, and like I did not see the figure whatsoever until I think Dimitri, did you?
It's the gardener.
It's the gardener. Felicia says, I love that.
Right, Felicia. I think I don't feel bad about not seeing it. I think there's something kind of brilliant in seeing an artwork and not seeing something, and then there will be this moment when it's revealed, and you'll never see it the way you did before again. I think that's great.
I think it's wonderful, and I think it's important that we talk about this piece also, and it's the color red represents. I think the color red suggests blood ties or profound love, and the other thing also is that the hidden figure, and by the bouquet of Bird of Paradise, and the flowers are very personal to her, which is her memory of her family home, her family's home in Southern California. And before reading that, I was kind of, going really deep into Bird of Paradise and how why did they end up there, and kind of the history of Bird of Paradise and all those kind of things. But then she's like, well, my family's home in Southern California. But also it's good to note that she talks about deep matrilineal and familiar relationships with these figures as well. And so, yeah, this is a good piece to end our talk on. I hope to see folks at the museum, unless the panelists have other things to add, or folks in the chat, there's things to add about this piece. We're going to end our session today. You've stayed with us for 15 more minutes. I cannot believe it. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you. We appreciate your input.